My guest today is Brian Carew, and we just finished a beautiful podcast where we dropped into a whole bunch of topics. I met Brian. The first time I actually experienced Brian was dancing, and this is a person I just really felt his freedom through dancing, and that really made me connect to him. I think the first experience we had together was dancing together. And Brian, just getting to know him now, he is someone who is really pursuing higher truth and doing a lot of deep work. And this podcast, we kind of drop into men's work. The intention was to start to delve into what is men's work? What does it mean to be a man today in the modern world? And it's a really interesting podcast because we kind of go through this contemplation, which ended up leading us towards this realization that in order to understand ourselves as men in the world today, we first have to do the work to understand ourselves at a higher level of consciousness so that we have the framework and the container for understanding ourselves as men and how to relate in the world as we know it, most of us. So that's a real basic overview of what we go through in this podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. Good morning, Brian. Welcome to the Spiritual Wealth podcast. I don't remember when I met you, but we've got you here today, and some of the topics we're going to cover range from men's work. I mean, that just chatting with you in the pre-log to this podcast, it sounds like men's work is not men's work, but just what is going on with men is kind of the theme of the contemplation here today. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit and tell me a little bit about you. I'm just actually getting to know you, in these early years here. Mm-hmm. I met you probably like a year ago at most.
Yeah.
And I met you dancing. So my actual first experience of you is like your energy on the dance floor.
Yeah, that's right, man.
Yeah.
It's really cool that we get to step here to converse and exchange.
Yeah.
I feel like it's been a long time coming. Thank you for having me here.
It's an honor having you here. You had a motorcycle here in the rain, so you must have really wanted to come out.
Really, yes, very, very much so, man. Yeah, I love what you do, and so a little bit about me. My given name is Brian. I've adopted I was given the name Brian. I go by Lion. That's the name that I've given myself.
Lion.
Yeah, it signifies for me. Well, like I'm a Leo, and I never really felt connected to that archetype. Although I felt in me for a long time the call to be a leader, to be a king. So I've claimed that name for myself to live into the incarnation. I see this as an incarnation, as a one, part of the infinite processing that I'm here to learn through my soul's journey. So we'll start with that.
Actually, that's a great place to start because there's a couple things that really attracted me to you. Just in passing, because the reason we know each other at all is just being at similar events, which is always a sign. Mm-hmm. But first was just what you radiate. So it's your energy. And like I said, the first experience for you was dancing. And I myself love dancing too. And I always can see who's truly free in their movement, in their dance, right? You can feel that freedom through movement. And I think the other thing that really bonded me too is just when I learned that you had done work with 𝗕𝗥𝗜𝗓𝗧, which is one of the master plants that I hold dear to my heart. And when you shared how dearly you hold it, it just connected me to you, and I then knew as well, like you really are on a path of elevating higher consciousness, and your understanding must be, So those two things alone, and the rest is I'm going to learn right now.
Thank you, man. I really mirror that back, with the movement and 𝗕𝗥𝗜𝗓𝗧, that it's almost like an archetype in a sense, like when someone moves deeply and when they have reverence for that plant, both those things speak so many words. There's an understanding. And a little bit about myself, like who I am in this life.
Good place to start.
Who is this Lion Brian character? I right now, people would know me as an embodiment and erotic coach. Been playing around with the labels a lot. Sometimes I call myself like a divine masculine coach, an intuitive coach.
That's what I see you sharing a lot online.
Yeah.
You share a lot of beautiful stuff.
Thank you, brother.
Really helping men.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you helping men with?
Yeah.
What are we struggling with? I think that was one of our things we wanted to cover, is just like, what is the role of the masculine in today's world as we change and evolve?
Yeah, man, the working with men has been a byproduct of my lack of a father. I love him very much. I'd like to speak to that. Like, I have a good relationship with my father and care for him deeply.
Yeah.
And through that journey of not having a father, I kind of castrated myself energetically from masculine energy. Masculine, I'll put that into context, not meaning men, meaning like one end of the energetic pole. You know, like when something comes into our universe, it becomes polar, and there's the first hermetic principle of gender, right? Everything is a father and a mother. So
Right.
I pushed away the masculine pole, thinking that it was bad. And I dove deeply in my feminine, and throughout that long journey, I've come to realize that masculinity is actually so important, that it's a necessary end of the pole, like, you know, of course.
Yeah.
And that is why I do this work now, because that journey has led me to much more integrity, much more pleasure, all the things in my life that any human would want. And also, since I was a child, I've seen and understood things in the world that I think that other people may not see. Very much like what's possible for us when we harbor love, when we are in service. And I saw these things when I was like very, very little. I thought all humans would see these things. And so I combine those two things, and I think, you know, I have a clear vision and a clear like love for the world. And this is like the work with men is just an aspect of that I can speak to, that I can connect to more easily with
And
my
right now, at
connection.
this time in your life too, that's where you're putting your attention, is one of the pillars that needs to be
Yeah.
explored.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, a lot of what I do in my work is from my own experience, and that's very much in my design, is like I take my experiences, I take what I learn, and then I share it with people, tell the story, help people universalize it, not from a place of you need to do this exactly, but rather here is a clear path, there is a path for you to go down. And so I just continue to do that, and that's really what I'm doing with men right now.
And there's a lot of men's works in various capacities emerging. And I'm pretty new to all of it. I haven't done a lot of that type of work. So I actually don't know exactly the differences in the types of men's work coming out, because I don't feel like they all are saying the same thing, actually.
Totally.
But again, I haven't really explored it, but it just from the energy, I'm like, some guys are saying this and some guys are saying not at all. And you see them bash each other, actually.
Totally.
Just from an online context.
Yeah, I find it interesting. You know, for myself, sometimes I feel like, what's the word here? Maybe an outlier, or someone who's doing it in a strange, weird way. Like, I haven't really done a lot of traditional men's work. I haven't been in a men's group per se.
Yeah.
But my own path has led me here. And yeah, with what you're saying about men's work, I do hear a lot of contradicting things or different things, and this is what we do, this is what we don't do. And I think all that is great. But at the end of the day, I think there's like a combination of two things. One, like, who am I as a man? Like, what is that for me in my journey?
Yeah.
And then how do I create men around me who are going to create a situation of positive competition and basically create that like iron sharpening iron type of dynamic. And
It also could be like, one thing that I really like doing with various things is going back to those original contemplations and really making space for it, right? Like, what is men's work?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a man? And really not just jumping to like, well, of course everyone knows what it means to, like, there's so many things in life we assume we know. Like, oh, I know that. Of course, everyone knows that, right? But then have you really sat, like, what is it?
Yeah, what does it actually mean?
What does it mean to be a man? And really sit with that contemplation for like a week, or many weeks, maybe in ceremony with medicines. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, who am I was one of the driving questions of my life.
Yeah.
And if you don't take a minute, well, I know who I am. I'm Brad.
Yeah.
Everyone knows who they are. No.
Right.
But you find out later that's like a very long journey.
Yeah,
on
man.
one simple instruction or contemplation. And like, I think we're in that early stage, like, what is a man seems to have a lot of controversy. There was just a film released not too long ago called What is a Woman? Did you hear about that?
I watched it, yeah.
I didn't watch it, but an entire movie of controversy based on just that one contemplation in question, apparently.
Oh yeah, it's and this is a very hot and intense, triggering for some topic.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to speak about because So the topic of gender.
Yeah.
And, I think actually I'm a great person to talk about it because I come from a place of where I believe that men and women are equal, and that in the sense that like need to be treated equally in all the ways. Now, don't get me wrong here. Men and women.
That was your belief? Is that what you're saying?
That was my belief.
It was, and it's shifted a little bit.
Yeah, it was very much my belief.
Okay.
I was also very, I don't like labels, but I was very like what the left is now. Like, yep, like change your sex. Yep, like all like queer like people like deserve all these rights, and they do. I'm not saying that. It's just like I would be labeled as queer, but I'm not because I don't uphold a lot of these things anymore. It's
Right.
interesting. Like the conservatives are now the fighting against the machine people. It's so hilarious.
Right.
But anyways, the reason I bring this forward is because I went from that side, and now I'm on this side where I see that the thing that people are trying to fight against when it comes to gender and like expression is, I understand where it comes from in the sense of equality and freedom of expression, but it's rooted in a distortion that has confused and manipulated them into doing something that what they think they're fighting against, and they're not.
Right.
And what that speaks to, or what I'm really getting at, is this, like I said, the first hermetic principle, gender. We come into this universe and there's a father and their mother. It's everywhere in nature.
Yes.
And
there's those two poles, and that creates, and then it goes on and on.
Exactly. And how you manifest, like, yes, I'm in this man's body. I have the feminine and masculine within me. I've been women in previous lives, no doubt, for sure.
Right.
And so what I see is this desire to manipulate the physical body, but really what's happening is that's an internal process. If you want to understand, like if you're confused and and all these expressions of yourself, it's like that's an internal process, but people have now externalized it and like, well, I'm going to manipulate my physicality in order to achieve that which I need to understand inside.
Yeah.
And it's just
ultimately it's going back inside.
Totally.
So what's causing the distortion though? Like, why is it so distorted?
And I think
that's like an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you could say lots of things, right? Like we forgot. Some might say that people know that if you are aware of the Hermetic principles and you know that it's the fabric that's sewing through our reality, that if you take that root, which is gender, if you remove it, it's very unstable. Everything becomes very unstable, and then whomever unstabilized it can create their own stabilization. Right. I don't mean to be a pessimistic person, but there's a lot to be gained from people who are wanting to change their physicality. Like there's a whole industry, the pharmaceutical health complex, like gains from that process.
Totally.
And so it's like, I guess coming like full circle, like I believe we should all express ourselves. I've dressed up in women's clothing as a child, and I like to express my femininity, but I know that in this life I'm a man.
I'm similar. Like I'm actually extremely masculine, and maybe when I started going to Burning Man like 6 years ago or something like that, I got my ear pierced and and I started to explore my femininity and play with feminine energy. But I've never, at any level, been like, I feel good like a girl. Like I don't know, just yeah, it's like I'm playing with it because it's there to play with.
Totally.
But I'm very clear in that way. Like
yeah,
I'm very attracted to women and masculine men.
Totally, man. And yeah, there's so many layers we could go into this. And yeah, I just think that, that movie you're talking about, What is Woman, it's really important. Like the stories we share is the reality we create. So if we start sharing a story that says, well, a woman is the thing that we decide it to be, not a woman is the producer of life. Like think of how distorted that is, taking that sacredness that women are creators of life. Yeah,
like I think that should be very clear that that particular pole creates. I like to dehumanize things personally, because I think nature is an easier way to understand things.
Yes,
right?
Thank you.
With 𝗕𝗥𝗜𝗓𝗧 I've shared with you, but I understand the sun is the creator now for our galaxy. From that point of view, the light, pure perfect potential, comes out of the light, the sun, and inseminates the mother, and the mother creates everything you could ever imagine that's beautiful. Life.
Yeah.
Life is created when that light, that semen, whatever you want to call it. I'm just making this up as I go here, totally. But it feeds the mother, and then the mother creates the womb. Mother Earth is the womb of creation. Yeah. And that clarity is the masculine and the feminine. And it's nice and simple. It's actually quite clear.
Yeah.
So with humans, we have that too.
Exactly. Yes. As
And
above, so below.
at the end of the day, I've got that life force energy, which we're going to get into
Yeah.
in a sec here. But the life force energy lives inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't I need that womb in order to realize my potential.
Mm-hmm.
I need that feminine to create what I have inside of me.
Absolutely, man.
Right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I can't go and put an earring on and dance feminine style at a dance party. But at the end of the day, I'm carrying that life force energy.
Exactly.
That pure potential.
That's the divine. Like if a tree tries to be, if a tree tries to be any sort of other plant, it's not going to go well for that tree.
No.
And some people will say, oh well, like for example, the non-binary argument. They're like, well, nothing is binary, so it's a distortion. It's like, yeah. And we have agreed to come in here in the binary state to learn. That's, I think sometimes we forget that in our spiritual journey, that we're a speck of infinite potential, and it continues to get distorted and distorted and distorted. So the binary aspect of our existence allows us to observe ourselves and understand. Otherwise, it's all is and everything is, and it's just a forever isness of perfection. Yeah. It's kind of boring. So,
yeah.
So it's like the binariness, although a distortion, is an agreed upon distortion. We forgot that we did that. And so it's like, with the whole, again, gender thing and sex thing, if anyone wants to express themselves, or, if they want to make those things happen, fantastic. But let's not change the reality that, like you mentioned so beautifully.
Creation.
Yeah, one's the seed, one is the creator. This is a necessary relationship, and that is what a man and woman is, and there is a biological aspect to it. It doesn't mean you can't express yourself, but if we start removing these stories, let's say these definitions, then it's like, for me, it's like a lack of knowing where we came from. If you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going, and people just forgot.
100%.
It's like it's not a bad thing.
I'm glad we're painting this picture though, because it's like what's happening here through this conversation. I'm feeling is there's the clarity of creation, how creation works, and realizing that expression has a lot more flexibility.
Yes.
Creation has a structure though.
Yes.
And if you become unaware of that structure, that'd be very confusing. And I don't see how you could be like, confusion's not a good state.
Totally.
Confusion is not a good state to be in. And I think this also feeds into where we can go back to like men's work and why there is so much confusion with men today. Because I have been to some men's work retreats and stuff.
Me too.
And my experience is like men don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that is a confused state.
Absolutely.
And that is not a good state of consciousness. Confusion.
It's not good for the world. It's not good for men. Men need to have a purpose. And of course, women need to have a purpose too. But I'd say women who are generally, they're more connected to their feminine, they are more they're the embodiment of natural expression. So they become, that's why they can be so in tune with their emotions. They're here to live out that beauty, their most beautiful thing, women. Yeah. Men, we need to do things. We need to have a purpose and a drive, and we need to have a mission. That's what we're, think about the seed. It has a mission. The seed goes to the egg always. The egg doesn't do it. It waits there. And it's in its beauty anyway. So, I think one of the issues, or one of the things we're getting at here with men's work, is that there is a lack of that leadership and that education upon, like, what does it mean, like, with the awareness that we're infinite consciousness, bringing that in and saying, okay, now you've distorted yourself into the incarnation of a man. Now you chose to do that. Now how do you live into that? How do you hold infinite divinity and seeing that you're infinite, but at the same time, the end is like, I'm in this finite expression right now, and it's very feeling real, and it's very like, ooh, it's really intense. It's like the most intense video game. How do I bring myself in the best way forward? How do I do that?
I think the answer to that is remembering, because then you share what we're doing right now. Yeah. Actually, this is part of the purpose. Absolutely. Purpose is to remember, is to share the this and, right? Yeah. So people talk about the higher self. So that is that infinite thing, and being able to actually connect to that and feel yourself as that. Yeah. Like, there's a difference. For me, it took me a lot of years before, like, I conceptualized it, and that's a good first step. But until I started to experience it, it's not real. It's just an idea. And it's okay to use ideas to start, but
I mean,
for me, that it took me a while before I could actually drop into those states. And I'm a man in this,
Yeah.
in the distorted, in my smaller self,
absolutely.
right? So big self, small self. I keep it simple.
Yeah, the and is. I love that you're mentioning that over and over. It's like it's so important because if we get caught in the or, then we've identified with the illusion. And I think this really confuses men and all humans is that they don't they get caught up in like, am I divine or am I human? Well, you're both. And it's the same thing, with the and. It's like you can hold this aspect of being the higher self and like infinite knowledge, and you can be this distorted version.
One thing that I think you have to pick your path, because what I'm also learning is I'm not, and I don't know for sure, but it could be this but some of the teachers I follow, it's just one.
Interesting.
Pure enlightened state. There is no duality. There is no, this is Maya.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
there actually is no separation. So the duality is the illusion of separation. But if you are some teachers, they're like, there is no other thing. There's only one pure state of bliss, perfect consciousness, and everything else is the illusion. Any split in the duality is illusory.
I agree.
So then you kind of have to pick. Am I going to live this? I think it is a choice. Is it this or is it just enlightenment, perfect enlightenment? And that's the only state I'm going to be interested in which case I won't do a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I'm not going to come play in duality because I'm just going to sit. And this is the thing, like there are people in the world who sit
and they just
and meditate, and that's it.
Yeah.
They just do pure oneness consciousness.
I'm glad you're...
And they don't come to this. And so, but that's a choice. And that's a choice I've been considering now.
Oh, wow.
Because I've experienced states of enlightenment.
Yeah.
And they're becoming a lot more frequent. And I'm starting to learn how to meditate in that way. The question is that my path? Am I here do I want to become a pure enlightened being only? And sit and just... Or am I interested in duality?
Totally.
And so I'm starting to learn to make that choice.
Thank you for... This is really important for people to hear, this story. That the and of like eternity, being an infinite being, and then I call it wearing the mask. When we wear the mask, it's like being aware you wear the mask, and there isn't any right or wrong way. I think when I got into my spiritual journey, the spiritual ego developed, and it was like, okay, I must ascend.
It's pretty common. Me too. It happened to me too.
And I realized
it's still there sometimes.
Yeah, it can drive things, right? Like the desire to ascend, whatever that even means, like as though it's a material gain, which is like the opposite, which is so funny. But I hear what you're saying, and I think this is a choice that we do have to make. It's like if I'm gonna play the game of duality and then just hold unity consciousness, I don't do anything. I hold that and I become like almost like a radiation.
Change the whole universe inside.
Yeah, exactly. Just hold that. So for me, I feel as though my soul came here in this incarnation to play the game.
Yeah.
And I'm playing the game, recognizing and playing the game. And and I think that can bring a lot of peace and like serenity to humans and to men, recognizing that like you can choose to play the game. You can be spiritual and you can be all the things and just understand like you're wearing the mask. Take it off every so often. Dip into the sea of consciousness.
Start by knowing you have a mask.
Yeah.
And there's a use. Yeah, there's social good reasons to have a mask.
Yeah.
Right? I run a painting company as one of my businesses.
Oh, really?
I don't show up and tell them I'm the infinite consciousness. Yeah. I say, hi, my name is Brad Samuels.
Yeah.
I'm a painter. That's a useful way to introduce myself, part of my ego system. That's the only thing that's important.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play that role, but never confusing myself that I am my role.
Exactly.
Right? I am not. That's not who I am. I'm the painter Brad. You didn't even know it until I just said it right now.
Right.
It's just a role that's useful for societal purposes.
Yeah, man.
And I can play that for sometimes. It's one of the masks.
Yes.
Or I can be like Brad the rock climber or whatever.
Yeah, we have all these expressions of ourselves.
Yeah, but never confusing myself and forgetting the truth.
Totally. I think people, they forgot that they forgot usually this, that, evolution says that I think we were talking about this, that evolution, we are evolving into something greater, but rather we have we have infiniteness in us, and we're just a speck of that infiniteness, right? So if unity consciousness is a brick of gold, we're a tiny little speck of that. So in you and yourself, as the, Brad has all these different expressions, and you're all those and none of those at the same time. I'd see it the same way for me. And so yeah, it's like sometimes we have to flip these things around to really understand our true nature.
Yeah.
Maybe last thing I'll say about this is, like, English is a weird language because it says I am this. Well, the reality is I am, period. Yeah. And like Gaelic, for example, says this name is upon me, implying that me is, there's nothing else to that except I am.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing you're touching on the English language, because the way we say it based on what's the normal way to say things is misleading.
Totally.
Right? So rather than saying even simple things like I'm happy, a more accurate way to say it would be like I'm experiencing a state of happiness.
Exactly.
Or even if you want to you get a little bit more clear, it'd be a state of happiness is occurring. So it's not I am not the state of happiness, no more than I am depressed. A state of depression is occurring. So you're experiencing it, but there's states of consciousness. Same with enlightenment. It's not stable. A state of enlightenment is occurring in the present moment. And then, now a different state is. So there's states.
Even the vibration of you saying that, I feel that in my body, because then you say like, yeah, I am depressed, and the ego is like, yum, 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 yum.
The ego is literally like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Right? So the wording is misleading with English, and when we can start to, some of the teachers I listen to, they never say the word I.
Right.
They say, what's one of the teachers? He says, one. He says, one must do this. One must do that. One. Not you must do this, or we should do this, or I should do this. One. Sometimes one does this. Sometimes one does that.
I love that so much.
And I noticed that he didn't from his speaking. I'm like, yeah, he never says I, and he never says you, and he never says we. He only ever says one.
Right. And it's important, the language we speak becomes ingrained in our subconscious.
Yeah.
And
misleads us.
Totally. That's a lot of the work.
My meditation is in silence.
Yeah, it does. It primes us, and that's like a lot of the work I do with men. Really, is what it comes down to, is the refinement of their internal, external language.
So we can use this let's build back into like where men are.
Yeah.
So we've definitely set a lot of context. I didn't realize we'd go there, but it does set context, because it comes back to like what are we doing in the individuated world that we're living in, which is how do we relate to other people, how do we relate to ourselves, and why are men struggling so much? I know we wanted to speak a little bit to like sacred union.
Yes.
Because you work with sexual energy, and that's something you help men with. And
yes.
I haven't talked a lot about it publicly, but I explored polyamory last year a little bit, and very difficult experience. And I don't want to say I failed, but like at the end of the day, I wasn't able to stay centered. Having two people I loved, and like I didn't see how you could pursue a path of sacred union. And the mentors I spoke with also said that you probably won't be able to. So I tested it and I failed in a way. And learned. I failed and learned, but I couldn't do it.
I think you succeeded.
Yeah. Nope. Thanks.
Yeah. I believe, this is my belief, that the path of polyamory, its success is that it teaches us that union is not in that path.
That's exactly what I think. Yeah. It taught me, it was an accelerated path to find out that sacred union's where it's at, and it did it really quick.
Yeah, and I want to wrap this in before people who are listening, their minds get wrapped in the or, union or this. Yeah. It's not about or. It's remember, it's infinite. So we have infinite amount of time to explore these things, and if your whole life is exploring open relationships, that's great. It's totally fine. I spent many years exploring it, and same to what you mentioned. I don't have enough energy or presence, nor do I think any man does, to create.
Yeah. If you want a queen, if you want a queen, they need 100% of you.
Exactly.
And that's, I'm still wanting to find out what the boundary of that is, but like queens need kings.
And it's like nature, right? We're an extension of everything, and as above, so below. And I believe that union is it's a natural law, it's universal law. And yeah, we have free will. You can choose to not go with natural law. It's not going to go very well, but it's going to, or however you want to put that, right? It's going to be something. But if what I've learned is the more that one goes with what the substrate is, for me that's Hermetic principles. The more fun it becomes.
Yeah.
And I feel as though union, it requires the full attention from each side. If they want to fully know each other in every deepest layer, it's like two universes coming together, and then all those different layers of the identity and the trauma and like all these stories that I have about myself that she has about herself. Those get wiped clean through the mirroring, through the initiation, through the container.
I mean, and specifically it was, which we can talk more in depth about, is the sexual energy. Having multiple partners, like my sexual energy was split up, was not centered.
Totally.
And actually, interestingly enough, during that process, like I learned a lot about just like breathing and like, because of, you can't just be ejaculating all the time either.
Yeah, totally.
You need to so you actually have to learn that by necessity if you're going to have multiple partners.
Yeah.
Right? I think somebody told me, well, I've read that it's like you shouldn't be ejaculating more than like once a week as a man.
Generally, yeah. When I coach men on semen retention, my aim is to get them, one, to not get in this absolutist mentality.
Wow, my phone went off. Let's just turn that off.
So. Yeah. Oh, good, man. It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, with semen retention, I try to be I am very careful, because men can easily get in this, like, okay, this is right, this is wrong. It's not about shaming oneself or what's right or wrong. Rather, it's like, if you want to be in your highest, holding your seed and moving the energy around the body is going to bring you to the highest.
Yeah.
And generally, like, it doesn't mean you have to hold all the time, but like you said, like, even just releasing once a week with intention is just massive change can happen to a man when they adopts that practice. Even if you don't necessarily know how, because like knowing how is a mental, intellectual thing. Your body already knows how.
I mean, even if you just know the basics that your most potent energy is that, and if you keep it within you circulating, that's going to be good.
Exactly. That's how
it's still hard to do, but it's
it definitely. And that hardness of what comes to my mind is like the climate that we're in. Like there's a lot of pornography. It's readily available, where men are primed to be ejaculating, to having lots of sex. So, but that difficulty can create huge refinement in a man if they choose to go on the path, if they choose to decide to see that within themselves they can create a union. The idea being, like, instead of ejaculating, you give that seed to yourself, and you impregnate yourself, seeding yourself so you can birth as a new man. And and then you can have a little union within yourself, right? You're like, during a self-pleasuring practice, the masculinity comes in through presence, undivided presence of whatever's happening, and then the feminine comes in through surrender, continued surrender to one's pleasure. You keep the seed within, and then you have your own little mini union within yourself, so that when you do come with another human, or like not literal coming, when you come into
relationship,
come into relationship, you've already brought yourself to a degree of integrity, of alignment. So that's a bit of my philosophy with the work.
Yeah, and that's what you help men with, it sounds like. So what are, like, when you do work with men, what are the kind of like starting, is that where do you start? Do you start with sexual energy? Like
generally, I mean, I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot that, like, my initial approach is pretty intense. A lot of times I just try to get the men that I work with, whether it's in person or online, like in a naked session. And the purpose for that is, well, to get them to understand through an embodied experience that this isn't about labels. Although they are useful, heterosexuality, bisexuality, homosexuality, somewhat useful, also very limiting.
Right.
Further distortion of what is. It's like, we're men, and men do need a level of intimacy, of connection, touching, that some would label as sexual. I label it as like more refinement and an upgrade.
Do you use the word men, or is it male? Just male?
Yeah, just male or like.
Are those interchangeable, those two?
For me, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I remove those labels and get into the container, and I'm like, this is about you learning from another man who has a degree of mastery or a higher degree of wisdom, of embodiment than you, and you want to learn how to get there. It's not about two men having sex or like that, or whatever the cultural paradigm that we've been told. It's about refinement through someone else who is in the same incarnation, the same male incarnation as you, who can show you. Same thing with women. Women need to learn from other women. And that's the approach I take. That's why I do naked work. That's why I show men. That's why I'm there with them, so they can see and feel my energy. And every time I do session with men, they're always
leading by energy.
Yes, leading by energy. They need to see and experience it in, I think, all the senses as much as possible. Because the gap that I see right now is like 𝗕𝗥𝗓𝗢𝗨𝗧, love the man, like so much respect. And then at the same time, it's like, if you just read and just like kind of see someone doing this with clothing, I don't think it's enough. I think you need to see men going through the action, going through it. And that's a deepening that I want as well. Like the men's work that I see is, there is an aspect of male erotic, what I call male erotic platonic bonding, where they're together, we're naked, we're charging ourselves up. You're witnessing your brother do that, and not like getting off by it, but like it's like I'm getting myself aroused into my sexual energy state, and by a byproduct, I'm potentiating the men around me.
Right.
And this is a definition that we have forgotten about. I believe that it was something that men did, but now it's labeled as like homosexuality or bisexuality. And again, nothing per se wrong with that, but I think it takes away from the energy and the potentiation of men coming together to do this work.
So you're bringing things back to energy and away from labels.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's as simple as that. It's just like, it's about the energy being cultivated. You'd be like, forget he's gay, he's being gay, or what that's. It's just like, there's powerful energy being cultivated here.
Totally. I think those labels are kind of the residues of, I gotta be careful when I say these things, like the residues of previous experience. Like I've worked with men, and I'm not saying all men are like this, so if you're a man, you're listening to this, and you get triggered by it, I mean no harm to you. And at the same time, I've worked with men who have come to me, whether attracted to me or like curious about me, and through the work, they realized that what they longed in their thinking that they're homosexual was just connection to a man.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, I've worked with married men who have urges to be with other men, and through my work, they've gone and been like, I'm more attracted to my wife now, and what I realize is like this deep fatherly wound that I have. I'm not saying this is for every man, but what they came to realize is the deep father wound was a desire to connect with the men that manifested in the label of homosexuality.
Right, so it's just the wrong... so there was something there, but it wasn't just that you're gay.
Yeah.
Or something like simplifying it like that. There's just a longing for connection with men.
Exactly, and so I think that, men connecting in deep ways, which we would label as homosexuality, I think there's much, much more to it. And I do believe that man and woman are supposed to be together. It makes sense naturally. So then where is the place for male with male? Again, I think it's to potentiate the masculine pole. And if that ends up being what we per se is a sexual experience, there is likely a place for that. It's just, does it come from me am I a gay man and I just want to be with men? Or is it that I long for the masculine and I want that energy, I want to understand that and cultivate it so that I can go to the opposite pole more charged?
Well said. Okay.
Thanks,
I really like that.
This is a paradigm.
And you're right, that it's interesting, like filming this and like, the delicacy of words. It's like on one level we have to be so like, don't get caught up in the wording, but then at another level you have to, being a good speaker is about correct language and articulation. And
thank you.
They're interesting topic. Like,
it can be incredibly triggering, right? Because and this encompassed that some people might think, or some men might believe, that what I shared wipes away their experience and the trials and tribulations of being a homosexual man.
Right.
And I that's not what I'm doing in any way, shape, or form. I went through a journey of, I wasn't sure if I was homosexual, if I'm bisexual, not really sure. And I at one point came to the point where I was telling myself I am pansexual. I just find humans attractive.
Okay.
But then as I did this work with, the Hermetic principles, the divine masculine and feminine, I realized that's not the fabric of the universe. That's not natural law. So if I look through the lens of natural law, and I think, okay, so union is really what nature wants. So then where is the
And creation.
Creation, yeah, union and creation, right? Because that's where creation comes from. You know?
Yeah.
So then what's the point of the same pole doing a dance? Well, I realized, oh, it's to potentiate that pole, to fortify it and more strength. I can't think of an example in nature. I'm sure there is. But tying back, it's like all that strife, all that struggle doesn't get taken away because I'm naming all this. It's just that is a layer of, let's say, the matrix, or a layer of reality that has caused a lot of suffering for these labels. Like, people try to find a place, like, I'm a homosexual man, I need to do these things, I need to become these things. Perhaps you're just longing to connect with men.
Right, maybe that's a big part of just men's communities right now. It's just like filling this thing of just being able to connect with men.
Yeah.
Brotherhood again.
Yes, brotherhood. It's so important. And
I do see there's like it's almost like we want to recharge up the poles and create ecstasy again, because there's like a dullness that's happened in the modern society. It's dull.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing, nobody knows what they're trying to do. We don't know what we're collectively building.
Totally.
Like, but that's when magic happens, is when these two poles meet. In all the stories from all the religions, like Shiva, Shakti, when they meet, fireworks.
Yeah, it's
right. It's just like, how do we build those polarities back up in a beautiful way?
Yeah,
a good way.
If we can, I like that you removed the humanness a while ago, and I think this is a really important process for this work. It's like removing the humanness so that we can stop taking it personally,
and then play the human experience.
Yeah, because it's like my ego. It's the ego who's like, well, I am this type of sexual proclivity, and I must defend that. It's like, you don't need to defend that. Like, we don't need to defend anything. These are small roles within the clock of, or lack thereof clock, but in infinite time. So, and that's not to say we don't respect ourselves, and that we don't have boundaries and needs. We can still play those games.
Yeah.
But just don't, like, if it becomes so ingrained, that's when we lose ourselves. When I say lose ourselves, we forget what we actually are. So if we can play the game from the place of knowing what we actually are, well, let's look, again, coming back to Hermetic principles, divine, masculine, feminine polarity. It's like, I'm going to hang out with men and be naked with them and intimate and share conversation, work out, like, be like, oh, fuck, this dude is like super strong, makes me want to be better. I'm going to do all those things so that when I go to my partner, the feminine pole, I'm like super jacked, like really fucking charged up. And I want my partner to do the same. I want her to hang out with women to bask in that which I can't provide her, which is that deep recognition and mirroring of the feminine energy. Yeah. So, yeah, it's very, very important.
This is a good, like, right now, I feel like sharing, like, what my mission is and my purpose.
Please.
Because it really comes down to me. I don't believe we can solve these problems from the level of human identification with the human. I believe my whole essence and why I even do this podcast is like to encourage people to embrace the path of healing and higher consciousness, which is just another way of find out who you are, find out who you really are, and then come play.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. That's like that. I'm here to encourage to say, hey, it's a really nice path to do that.
Yeah, man.
It's a good one. Do that if you're interested.
Yeah.
It's really a beautiful path. The path of healing and higher consciousness, and there's so many modalities you can go down. That plant medicines was the one that helped me the most.
Yeah,
you don't need to do that path, but they all lead to the same palace.
Totally. I think that's an important thing to say. It all leads to the same place. It really does. Yeah, plant medicine, similar to yourself, has been such a great teacher for me. Yeah, for many years since I was a teenager. And again, no one has to do that or anything.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Take a couple lives if you want.
Yeah, you have lots of time. I know again, like the game becomes really fun, like what you're saying, when we know what we are. Yeah. And you know what you are, also knowing that is like a half-truth, right? The Tao can't be spoken. But when you know that to the best of what we can comprehend, then the game becomes really, really fun. Even when I'm suffering, even when I'm going through, or not but like when there's that state of suffering, there's beauty in it. There's beauty, yeah.
There's beauty in it. I recently did a post or like a video on grief, and it was in essence, it was that grief is an experience of love. Yeah, it's a different perspective on how to experience love.
I love that.
Heartbreak or love, falling in love, is like the ecstasy side, and then heartbreak is, oh wow, how deeply I loved, and
I love
And
that.
I'm experiencing an experience of love.
Dude, that's
Right?
so good.
But if you mislabel it or misidentify with it, it's actually a bad experience. But it's actually a temporary state of experience of grief, where you get to take a moment to presently experiencing how deeply you cared.
I love that so much.
Right? That's why you're grieving.
Yeah.
And grief is the process that is used in nature.
Love that. It really ties in how everything is held by unconditional love.
Yeah.
And
So
that,
it's the umbrella at the top.
yeah, it's like holding everything in there. And this makes me think about the idea that I've always said, or not always, but more recently, I've realized that light and dark are both teachers that bring us into alignment.
Sure, yeah.
And like, right, you could say like the good feeling of love, like you're in love, and it's like that's the light. It's it feels good. It's like go down the path. The other side, the grief, it's still bringing you on the path. It's just doing it with a harder hand.
100%.
And that's, I think people, they do the or, or we humans can do the or. We're like, okay, well, this is good and this is bad. It just is. One is just feels nice to the ego, to the body. One hurts more.
Yeah.
But they're both bringing you into alignment. They're both showing you something, and that's what we signed up for, you know.
So some of the things that I'm noticing through our conversation, I guess, is that we're just talking a lot about consciousness.
Yeah.
And so maybe dehumanizing things a little bit so we can focus on the nature of reality and how the universe works, the energy, and how that's useful. And maybe how just, I guess, speaking of men's work, which is where we really started all this from, is like, maybe it's just, that's part of what facilitation has to really encapsulate now, is like, it's about higher consciousness, so you can understand what men could be, the positive, I suppose.
Yeah.
The yang.
Yeah, the yang. Yeah, exactly.
And that's why in Taoism, all these things, the yin and yang, it's an easier, less charged up way to identify with good and bad.
Yes.
It's just yang energy meets yin energy, magic.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're a man, you're the yang, you're the positive, you're the light, and then the yin is that dark, empty, open, full container where anything could be created.
Exactly.
And I think maybe there's so much entanglement at this time in the world socially with all these labels.
You really painted a good picture, man. Yeah.
And maybe that's part of what men's work has to. I'm not like a men's work facilitator, but if I was, I think that's how I'd go, is like, let's just start relabeling to lighter things that have less charge. Because men and women, as we saw in that What is a Woman thing, I didn't actually see it, but man, it's a lot of charge on that movie. Apparently it was like one of the most watched movies.
Oh yeah.
Like views in like out of all the Hollywood films and everything.
It's a huge, well, and I think the reason is it plays at, whether people know it consciously or unconsciously, it plays at that fabric of what we are.
Yeah.
We're starting to.
That's why it's charged.
Totally.
What are we?
Yeah. What are we? Yeah, exactly. What are we? And so I agree in that what you're saying is like, if we want to do men's work, and we'll put it in the context of men's work, but this applies to everything. But if we want to do men's work, we have to understand what we are. Okay, well, like coming from the biggest picture to the funneling down, it's like, okay, consciousness, but then it's like, okay, now we're in dual reality, like you said, we're the yang, we're the fire, we're that aspect and that pole.
And now we have to communicate that to society, which is the world of concepts and labels and entanglements with stories and.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, how do you bring that down without it distorting it all?
I mean, I think it's always going to be a distortion. That's,
Yeah.
That's the fun part about it.
That is the fun part. You're right.
It's like, that's the point, and it's such a funny thing. It's like, to be distorted. It's, like, I guess if you expand out, it's like we forget to remember. So sometimes I think about like, as a spiral, it's like, the spiral moves around, but then like, so let's say I go one spiral up, I'm in the same line, but now wider, more consciousness, more awareness. So my thinking of this is that it's not necessarily about like, how do we become distorted? How do we just broaden our ability to understand the distortion and continue to play the game with more awareness?
Yeah.
So that, like, like if we look at ancient civilizations, very technologically advanced, there's like science, math, physics, it all adds up, like super advanced. How do we get to those states again but not fall? Because it fell. We forgot so much. Same thing with men and women. Like we obviously had different structures, different ways of being. different ways of seeing technology. Like we see those ancient cultures as maybe barbaric because they don't use the same technology as we do, but they use the earth. The earth was a whole grid. That's why all these ancient sites were around. They were just using the earth as a grid, and they understood, and what you're saying about the sun, that everything's light, that earth is like, you know how you shine light through a prism and it distorts the light?
Yeah.
That's what earth is. It's a distorted fractaling of light, and we perceive it as this density, but it's just light.
And then we name it and get confused.
Yeah, we're like, oh, it's round, oh, it's flat, it's all those things.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, just look at anything else in nature and how light works, you'll know how the earth works. But,
we also don't have a lot of symbols to remind us of all this stuff. Our society's not built around that reminder.
Totally.
You know, I'm reading a book right now on habit creation, and the number one thing is like, you need to create the environment. You want to become a musician? They're like, put a guitar in the center of the living room.
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to remember the duality? You should probably have some reminders. I was in Peru.
Yeah.
One of the 𝗕𝗥𝗜𝗓𝗢 is the center of it all. Mm-hmm. This pyramid structure would have taken hundreds of years to build.
Yeah.
The pyramid is literally split into two color stones. Guess which ones? Black and white.
Yeah.
They don't forget the duality. There's a positive and a masculine, evenly split.
Yeah. I love that you're saying this, because a few minutes before I wanted to mention this, that the human mind sometimes is flawed in that it thinks, well, this is sort of the egoic aspect of the mind. It'll say, oh, I've learned this thing and now I know it to be true. No.
Yeah.
It's not the case. And this is like a very subtle layer of the ego, as you're mentioning so beautifully right now. We need to have reminders, because we get so lost in the sauce, for lack of a better word. And that's part of the process. That's how you learn, right? You dive into the distortion, learn all this stuff, expand out. Wow, that was cool. I learned this thing. I'm going to go dive back in. But sometimes you dive in and you've been in for a long time. That's the wheel some scar.
Long time.
That's all that is. You know?
Yeah. One thing I learned too about like ego structures is, because once I started after the Peruvian pilgrimage I just went on, like I spent a lot of time in enlightened states.
So cool.
And when I got back, one of the new questions that came was like, well, then why fall from grace? Why do we do it? Mm-hmm. And the answer that came through is because we want to, we choose to. Mm-hmm. And it helped me also understand why we forget. The human experience becomes more real and dramatic the more we forget.
Totally.
And that makes it a more interesting drama.
Absolutely.
So the more you forget the origin of the ancestry, that you're a descendant of light, the more it feels like you're actually a human. I'm actually like, so the more I forget the truth of light, I actually feel like, oh, I really am Brad.
Yeah.
And like, it really is important, like, that I hit my goal or whatever. Right? There's a lot more drama to that, and we like the drama. Yeah. So we love the drama, and I think we're coming through an age now, I think, where maybe we're tired. So people are tired of the drama now.
Yeah.
As a collective, it's starting to get tired, so people are now going to remember again.
Yes.
Because we want to return to peace.
Yeah.
But, you know, enlightenment is about peace. And not that many people are interested in peace. A lot of people are interested in drama.
Totally.
And you can't, so that's part of the forgetting, right? As you forget, you're less peaceful, more dramatic, big, interesting story of drama.
Totally, man.
And that's interesting to observe, is what I've now just like, that's interesting to witness, see what.
It's beautiful. And it's you get me thinking about the Yuga cycles. In the last age of Kali Yuga, you could say it's the darkest age, where humans accept their role. Like, I'm a farmer, that's what I am.
Yeah.
And the density, the matter, is all that there is. Now we've shifted, and we're in a new age where we understand, oh, it's all energy. Oh, like, it's not that the brain manifests consciousness. Consciousness, being energy in motion, is everything, and everything manifests from that. And now that perpetuates the question of the individual being like, who am I? What do I want to be? What's my story? That's the age that we're in now.
We're coming out of, or I don't even know.
Yeah.
But
we've been here before.
Yeah.
Just doing it another way. Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll have to have you on another podcast.
Oh,
we could keep going forever.
We'd love to do a series. I feel like this is like, we just like went into Pandora's box. Then we can like start to get really specific into these areas. And this is a great start off for both of us, man. Like, I've been wanting to know you more and more. And I feel like now it's like, it's more of our time.
Yeah.
Probably be here in Squamish next year.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
You can come climbing with me.
Absolutely.
How does
man.
someone get a hold of you if they want to come learn about your work?
Yeah, best place is Instagram, Carew_embodiment, CAREW_embodiment. I do have a website, carewmovement.com. I need to change the domain.
Yeah.
Instagram is usually the best. That's where I run most of my stuff. People can also find me through Human Potential Academy.
I'll put links for both these then.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, dude, absolutely.